Welcome back, Spiralers. I am one of your hosts, Sam, and I'm here with my best friend and co-host, Gina.
Hello.
And we are joined by someone that I was so deeply impacted by when I met her last year. You already know her name because you clicked on the episode title, but Kate Speer and I met at the Harvard Creators Summit for Mental Health. And when I tell you this woman stood up and she shared her story, I was floored. I felt like I could not be in the same room as her. I was like, why did they invite me when there are people like this in this room? And it was so funny because we connected over the fact that she felt the same way. She had felt like, wait, why is everyone here so awesome and cool? How am I in this room? And we realized together through our shares that everyone had an important piece to create the amazing puzzle that was the summit, and everyone had a beautiful contribution to make. And I wanted to invite Kate here today because she, to me, is the embodiment of a mental health warrior and an advocate for people who are going through things that they may not have the words to put to their experience. And so, Kate, welcome to the Spiraling Higher Studio.
Oh my gosh. Woof. I don't know. I'm not going to live up to that introduction. So
yes, you
that
are.
being said, thank you so much for having me. It's really a joy. It is really a joy. And I feel the same about meeting you. Truly.
So I'll never forget. So Gina knows, but we met in Boston last August. And I'll never forget when the van was taking us to the campus from the hotel. You were the first person I laid eyes on and the first person who made me feel safe.
Same. You were always open. And I think the greatest thing we can be as humans is open. It's
100%.
just offering that space. I think we so often think that being like there for people means getting it. And I think actually being there for people is being safe and kind of curious about who they are, because we can never really know.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of it.
Exactly. And so I got in that van and you were like the first person I saw. And of course, Waffle was there, your personally trained service dog, which we'll get into because I was fascinated by the work that you do with your service dogs. But I remember just climbing into the van. You made me feel so safe. And I remember thinking, like, I'm in the energy of someone who fully and deeply accepts themselves. Because to feel accepted in the presence of another is to really be in the presence of someone who radiates self-acceptance. And it makes me think about all of the things you had to go through to get to such a deep level of acceptance. I truly believe the most self-accepting people have gone through like the darkest nights of the soul. And so I would love to invite you to just start by telling us about your mental health journey. I know that's so broad. And if anyone's heard her TED Talk before, you've probably heard this before, but I would love for you to share it in your words today because you've never been who you are today. And I'm curious to know where that all started for you because, where you are now is just beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. My story. Woo. Okay. Well, do you have 7 hours? I'm just kidding. Don't worry. Don't worry. Quite simply, I grew up feeling different and I didn't have the words for it. And I also grew up knowing there was nothing wrong with being different, that the world just didn't get it yet. And so I just have all of these visceral memories of standing up for the new kid or the kid with cystic fibrosis or cerebral palsy. Like those were my friends because I felt really othered. And later in life, when I was 16, I was diagnosed with ADHD. So I'm, as my current psychiatrist calls it, batshit neurodivergent. Like that is my diagnosis. Of course, back then, I'm 36, basically 30 years ago when I was in first grade, nobody really knew what they know today. And so they didn't understand about the differences in people's brains. They didn't understand how you could have ADHD but sit still. They also couldn't really comprehend within the policies how to accommodate any type of kid that wasn't underperforming. So they were really only like for an IEP or 504, like typical education plans, they were only helping people who were failing, literally, their classes. And that, because I was incredibly privileged and born with a genetic intelligence, that was not me. And yet I had to work insanely hard for like learning to read, learning to write. I couldn't do that until like third and fourth grade. I was very late. And I just felt I was also just like insanely bullied because I couldn't read, I couldn't write, I was stuttering, I was dyslexic, we now know. But yeah, it was just a really rough go. And I think I look back and I now realize how I just didn't feel safe, both in my body, in my mind, in my being. And I also wanted to create that. And I could feel drawn to other people who didn't have that safety. And I felt just really aligned with this idea that we needed a space that was for us. We needed a place where we could be ourselves. And I know all of my friends, like I have friends who I went to like preschool with, they were like, you always knew who you were. You were like, it was a lot, but you know, we loved you for it. And it was largely because I refused to be treated poorly because I was different. And so I think in a weird way, I was just born this like stubborn kid who had like a colorful zest to just advocate for herself. And I was like, you're not going to put me in the corner. Like, baby is not going in the corner. Like, woo. And yeah, I mean, I was a handful. I'm not going to lie. And I made it through. But I think in that process, in, you know, years and years of not having the support I needed, both societal structures and education structures, and honestly, like within my own family. And that wasn't for lack of trying. Like everybody tried desperately hard and was trying to help me. I just really internalized this idea that my other kind of being, this difference in me, was actually bad. And I think by the time I was about 15, it really caught up to me. And that was when really the mental illness started to take over. So depression was the first manifestation. I cried literally all the time. I would cry on the way to school. I would cry during class. Like the story I always tell, and people are probably over it by now, but it's literally, I would like walk into my high school teacher's room and I'd say, hi, my name is Kate. I live with depression. You have two choices. You can send me to the guidance counselor, and she's my best friend. So that just means I get to hang out with my friend, or you can let me cry and actually get an education. I really hope you can be uncomfortable enough and accept that discomfort so that I can cry and get an education, because I really want to go to college. Wow. But I also totally understand if you don't. That was me at age 16. Like, what? But I did that my whole life. So I did that through depression. I did that through being diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which we now know is a misdiagnosis. I did that through college, which ended up taking 6 years due to suicidality, intermittent psychosis, and some really extreme mood lability. I did that through my memory loss. I had electroconvulsive therapy when I was 18 and lost 2 years worth of memory. So I had to rebuild my entire memory thereafter using my camera and a journal. But through it all, I think like in this beautiful way, because I had a hard time learning to read and write, I knew how to work hard. And so I just kept working hard. And in the back of my mind, even though I had internalized so much of this societal conditioning, all of this just endless noise that you have to be this way or look that way or do this to be, quote, enough or right, I knew that wasn't true. I knew there was no shame in pain. I knew there was no wrong way to be human as long as you're kind. And I think that really carried me through more than anything. And it really allowed also me to have community. I often think when I like look through these many times, so like I was hospitalized 21 times. I was sexually assaulted in a unit. There was a lot of trauma that occurred. And it all culminated, and transparently, I talk about mental illness like it's normal because it is normal. So please choose yourself if talking through suicide is too much. And just like skip over the next 5 minutes. But yeah, I attempted and happened to survive. But I think all the while, like I've always known that life is duality. It's the coexistence of joy and pain. And that if we really want a world where we all belong, if we really want a world where we actually can heal and be our full selves, that looks like building a world where we can all hold space, like hold kind, unequivocal, unconditionally accepting space for people in their pain, as well as people in their joy. And I really think that throughout like my life, I somehow was just given the gift of knowing that truth in my body. Like I've always known that. And because of that, I've always found people who also told me their stories.
Mm-hmm.
I always say, I'll go first. And what I've always found is that, sure, maybe in public, people will be like, oh my God, she is wild, or like, holy shit, did that woman just say that on a call? Happens all the time at Harvard on a regular basis. And then after, I get 3 emails and they say, thank you so much. Let me share my story. And so I'm asked all the time, like, why are you so honest about, suicide and psychosis and being inpatient and all of this? And I say, because there's absolutely no shame in mental illness. There's no shame in being fully human. There's only shame in stigmatizing that reality. And when I share, people join me. And as people join me, I am reminded time and time again that when we show up and hold space, we all have the chance to heal. And that's why I'm so motivated to do what I do. And so, yeah, just excited to be alive, which is quite rare, given that many of my friends who I spent my 20s with did not make it out of the mental health care system alive.
Oh my God, Kate, like I'm literally tearing up right now. Do you see this? Like, I didn't want to interrupt.
I was trying to just like keep it a little tight. I don't know.
No, that was just, oh my God. I felt so emotional when you shared that about really creating a world where we can hold space for this pain, because I think so much of what we deal with is because we can't hold the pain, right? The way that we almost like, the way that our bodies try to cope with that inability to hold space for pain is why we suffer so much. And I love how you said there's no shame in mental illness. There's only shame in stigmatizing it. And I think that we are releasing that tendency to stigmatize when we see real human people behind these stories. Because I think I can speak for myself as a child, but when I learned about mental illness, I didn't like know a person who dealt with it. It was like you just learned about bipolar, or like you heard the term schizophrenia, or you heard someone go through depression. You didn't like know a person who dealt with it. You just heard the word and then you were like, oh, that's bad and scary. And I didn't know how to engage with those things with curiosity and hold space for them until I dealt with them, until I was able to hold space for people I loved going through those things. And that's why I felt so attracted to you, Kate, because you were someone who was like, I'm like not hiding this at all. And you were the first person to stand up actually when we were at the summit. We had to go around and kind of share like all of our thoughts and just like what we felt about this experience. And you just went up there and you said, I feel like I'm not supposed to be here. I don't know why I was invited, which was so funny because every single person ended up saying the same thing. And you were like the candle that like lit all the other candles. And it gave us this freedom to be like, wait, like, were we allowed to say that? Are we literally allowed to say what we were thinking, how insecure we were, or how uncomfortable we felt? And yeah, I actually just started tearing up when you shared that, because you create the most incredible space online and offline for people to be honest with themselves, which is, I think, the very first place healing starts.
Exactly. It's when we hold space for our whole selves. I often say the scariest thing we'll ever do is acknowledge that we're part of the problem. And the bravest thing we'll ever do is admit that we're the solution too.
Yes, I love that. Something that I often say is that, we tend to be the weapon that we kind of use against ourselves, and then we create these wounds, but that we also equally have the power to hold the medicine. And it is, I think in the moment when you realize that you hold the medicine, it can be equally inspiring, but also
daunting.
Kind of, daunting, because you're like, wait, I have to do more work. And I heard that in your TED talk. You're like, I have to do more work on top of already dealing with all of this.
I literally the TED Talk is PG. Like the things I said to that therapist, I was like, how dare you suggest that I need to do more work? All I have been doing my entire life is work. I didn't go to bed until like 1 or 2 most of my childhood, just trying to function. And I was like, the idea that still at age 27, I'm supposed to continue just slogging just felt brutal. And yet, like, and this is like probably where it's like written on a Post-it pretty much everywhere in my house. Freedom lies in the work you are avoiding, Kate. Freedom lies in the work you are avoiding. And it's true. Like, it
so
sucks.
true.
And I'm not here to be like, woohoo, you get to do the work. But it is also a privilege to get to do the work, to have agency, to be outside a psychiatric ward, to not be medicated to a point of a coma. Like, that's pretty incredible. And I often think that how dark it got helped serve how light my life is now, because my comparison, it's like, my boss will apologize. Oh, I'm so sorry I have to do this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is fun. I'm not in a psych ward. And she always laughs because that's my comparison every day. Like, whatever it is, it's better than being in a locked psychiatric unit. And when that's your barometer, it's a pretty great life.
Yeah. Gina and
I want to go back. Oh, go ahead.
No, I want you to share your story, but I was just going to say that Gina and I have talked so much on this podcast about how like the happiest, lightest people we know have usually gone through like the absolute darkest depths. Like when we hear about their life stories, we're like, what? Mm-hmm. And they're like, yep.
Totally.
And that's why I appreciate like another breath. And we're like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, one of the parts of the story that I didn't, I've yet to mention is just the fact that basically 11 years ago, so before I learned about how to do these little tiny steps, I call them big little victories. And I think this goes back into this idea that like the work is so daunting. So yes, we acknowledge we're part of this. We acknowledge we have the power to change, tiny little steps in our day, but like, holy heck, that's a lot. Prior to that, doctors thought I would never live independently. So there was basically, and I just finished the first draft of my memoir that talks all about this era in my life.
Incredible.
I know. It's wild. I'm like, holy shit. Yeah. But basically, the truth of it is that it doesn't have to happen all at once. And I think, especially for me as someone whose brain is just wired to have complete time blindness, I call it time optimism. I just think I can get everything done right now. Okay. Rebranding. But that aside, it is all about doing it in tiny, tiny, tiny steps. And I think something that a lot of people don't realize, when they'll be like, oh, okay, so you like work at Harvard and you write a book and you train your own service dog, did not always look like that. So like 11 years ago, I literally could not leave the house without having a full-blown panic attack and shitting my pants. So my body was so dysregulated that from the age 18 onwards, my body, it manifested to have like actual fecal incontinence. I know it's gross, but this is actually a huge issue that's not talked about. A lot of dysregulation, we all know it's stored in the body, but manifests in digestive issues. And so I was literally like wearing diapers, waking up at 3 a.m. to go grocery shopping because I was so scared of human beings. And like, so you could use that like automatic checkout. And I was like, I don't want to see people. So I would go in the middle of the night, like high on Ambien, just not ideal, but that aside. It was dark. It was really dark. And the way I began my actual healing wasn't with some grand adventure. It was literally by getting up every morning, getting out of bed, changing my pajamas, and getting back into bed. That's it. And I did that every day for a month, and I kept track of it. And then I added making coffee. But like that, and I did each big little victory, as I call them, like once a day per month. And I scaled it every single month. That's how slowly it went. And I think a lot of people assume especially in this age of digital media, that
Mm-hmm.
everything's going to just be snappy and quick. And it's like you watch this reel and someone's like, I got the 5 ways to heal, like boom, boom, boom. And I'm like, that's hot shit. Like, good for you. That's 20 years. Like,
Yes.
and that's not often said. So I do want to just like anchor that this is a process and success is showing up. And it's about that practice and honoring that practice in a way where it's not about the outcome. It's about the work being the win.
Yes.
And that's really, I think,
the journey.
The win.
Yeah, I think it's just like breaking it down, as you said, into like your bricks. But I'm just rattling on. So you guys.
No.
please.
Oh my gosh. I love everything you're saying. And I think it's so important that you share that incremental I guess expectation, because I think for sure, especially people that listen to podcasts, that read books, watch an Instagram reel, they're like, oh, now I know why I'm like this. And then they tend to start applying their old survival strategies to healing. It's like, I got to do this perfectly and I got to do this quickly. And what's wrong with me that I'm still dealing with this? And I think that's literally why we called our podcast Spiraling Higher, because it is stuff that we're going to revisit. It is going to be incremental. We are going to cycle through them. And it's just so refreshing to hear someone really give us the reality of it, the truth of it, so that we don't feel so alone when it doesn't happen after reading one book, when, we are still having a day where we're still struggling through something that feels so heavy. And so I love that you emphasize that so deeply, because I really think more people need to hear that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I need to hear it. Truthfully,
Yeah.
I think it's something, actually, Sam, you were the one who said this. Like, I show up and say what younger me needed. Yeah. And I think about that a lot right now, that I literally started recording videos talking to myself, which felt ridiculous when I began doing it. And I need to remember that this is hard. And I need to remember that little steps are the big steps. Little things are the big things. And I think that so often, because we've become so accustomed in the digital ecosystem that is ever increasing and kind of endlessly, connecting us, but also fracturing our understanding of self. There is this falsehood that gets perpetuated. And I think the healing space, interestingly, has actually, although it started with this beautiful intention of community, has actually, at least for me, felt increasingly ostracizing, because so much feels unattainable. And it's largely because so much is polished and edited. And I think, a lot of people are like, how can you be a marketing strategist and have not applied that to your own channels? And I say, because life is messy. Tidy lives are hidden ones. And I refuse to live a hidden life. So I will be messy, and my presence will be messy. And that is how I honor my humanity. And the people who package it, the people who make it pretty, even though that is like this beautiful intention of helping people heal, it actually sets other people up for failure, because it doesn't look like that. It looks like piles of laundry and moldy dishes and like days in bed and like binge eating donuts because you just didn't, make it work that day, and getting up the next day and saying, I'm going to try again. And I wish there was more of that. I think there has been some of it online, but I think more often than not, it gets packaged in these really unattainable achievements instead of these really relatable, bite-sized things that we can all do.
Yeah, I think, my journey, for anyone who's been listening for a while, you'll know that one of my biggest fears is literally doing this. And so much of my journey over the past couple of years since starting the podcast has been going a lot deeper into understanding my anxiety. And what's been so interesting is that as I've healed from this adrenaline addiction, I've started to feel my anxiety so much more.
Yes.
And that's, I think, the byproduct of when you start healing. You're like, I feel so much worse. This is terrible. And you start wondering, oh my God, I've been numbing from this. Like, no wonder, because it was so painful, so heavy. And I think one of the most healing things that I learned on my journey was it's not the goal to never experience this. It's not the goal to get rid of the anxiety altogether, but to really change our relationship to it. And one of the biggest steps for me has been giving myself permission to do it messily. You know, one of the things that I get a lot of anxiety about is traveling. When I leave my daughter and my husband, and I have a lot of childhood trauma around just moving locations and stuff like that. And I hated how I felt at the airport. I would always be like, okay, I'm not going to feel it this time. I'm not going to feel it this time. And that's what created so much more of it. It wasn't until I said I get to experience it today if that's what comes up, you know, and I get to have a good day and a day that's way more challenging, and that's okay. And giving myself permission even to come on to things like this, or, you know, any of my things that I have to do public speaking for, and giving myself permission to completely screw it up.
Yes.
And
yes.
That's what allowed me to actually do it in a way that didn't feel terrifying, because before that it was like, gotta do it right. Can't let this get the best of me. Gotta push through this. And instead it was like, nope, it gets to come along with me. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I think more people need to hear that, because I certainly needed to hear more of that. And I think that's why your story really resonated with me so deeply, because it affirmed for me why it's so important that we talk about this so openly, because I was unsure about talking about it so openly as a host of a podcast to talk about.
Totally.
This is scary for me. But like you said, I can't tell you how many people have reached out and said, I would have had no idea. And I think that's the crazy thing, is everybody just assumes that because we're doing this, that it's easy for me. But it's not. And I want everyone to know that, so they feel less alone.
Yeah, no, so much that. I think one of the most beautiful things I learned in therapy, and I learned it very early, I think like when I was 16 or 17, I had this wonderful therapist who unfortunately passed away in my 20s. But he really impacted my life in a beautiful way. And he always taught me that feelings aren't bad, there are teachers. Yes. And I just think that always coming back to that, like, what is this trying to teach me or tell me about me and my past and what I need right now, has been a really powerful reframe that's actually allowed me, instead of thinking of the feeling as an enemy, to think of it as a guide.
Yes.
And I think that's obviously easier said than done. And it's really hard, especially in a world that has taught us over and over and over again that pain is bad. But pain is not bad. Pain is teaching us that either a circumstance in our past that is in our body, or that is like coming up in our body, or a circumstance in the present moment is not serving us. And that can honor a life on purpose, a life of intention, of changing course, so that we can move towards more joy and lightness and alignment. And I think I've been recently experimenting. I've started internal family systems therapy, and it's been really powerful to think of not only like these feelings as teachers, but also these bodily reactions as basically like younger versions of myself that have yet to be seen and kind of held. And I think for anyone who is kind of in that space of like, oh my God, like I am not leaving my house. I am not eating. I am not drinking. I am not getting out of bed. First, I'm so sorry. That's really hard. And I know it feels like no one gets it, because it's your fight. And I don't presume to get it. I also know that I've been there in my own way. And I think that's where things like internal family systems can be really loving and kind. Instead of feel like it needs to be fixed, it's about being held. And I think when we think about our truths and our feelings as things that need to be held, it makes it a lot easier to move through them and learn from them to work towards a better tomorrow.
Yeah. Gina and I both are really huge proponents of IFS, or, you know, colloquially known as parts work. And what I love about the paradigm is that it essentially helps you see that every part of you, even whatever is anxious, whatever is angry, whatever is protective, it's all love. Like it all wants to love you, and it all wants you to be okay. And when you start to see the feelings, like you said, as teachers, or really as like unloved parts of yourself, the work is to become more loving, not to change it. And then the most beautiful, ironic thing we've both found is by loving something, you give it the power and permission to change when it wants to. And it's not you changing it. It just, love changes it. right? I think about, this is going to be such a silly example, but I think about these little rescue dogs and they're so scared. Oh my God, they're so scared. Like you try to like touch them and they're like biting and snarling and they're in the corner. And you don't try to change their behavior. You just love and accept them and you're just kind to them. And then they change.
Yes.
Like, and I feel like that's
oh my
what's
gosh,
happening
Sam,
within
yes.
ourselves.
Yes. I just resonate. That's the example I always use. It's like you have a pack of wounded rescue dogs that are all of your little parts, and some are going to snarl and some are going to hide in a corner and some are going to shit the cage, and none of them are bad. They're hurt and they're scared, and it's all about figuring out how to honor each of them, how to hold space for each of them so they can learn what, a secure attachment and love really is. And I think one of the things that's been really fascinating, especially recently, is all of the work that's coming out about mind-body connection as we work through that. So as we think about like if they're the rescue dogs or parts or whatever, however we relate to it, this idea that these many facets also show up in our body. And I think a lot of people often feel like this is very abstract, which I completely understand. Like for those of us who've spent hours and hours reading and nerding and obsessing over this, we're like, oh, this makes total sense. We have all these parts and da-da-da-da. My husband looks at me like I have 9 heads and I'm Medusa and I'm like coming out. And I'm like, okay, like let's slow this down a little. And I think one of the most powerful ways to slow it down is actually to get back to the body. And befriending our body is the first work. And I often think in all of the things I've done, and I've tried probably over 15 different therapeutic modalities at this point. I've been on 27 different psychiatric medications. Like I've done, you name it, they've probably tried it on me. And I think the most beneficial in all of it has been exposure response prevention therapy. And it's this idea of learning slowly and sustainably how to sit with discomfort in our bodies and the resulting discomfort in our minds. And it's something that has been truly transformative. And I come back to it every day. I literally, there's not a day that goes by where I don't think about this practice. And I think when you imagine that daunting, okay, I'm got to get out of bed and do the laundry and learn how to get a job and all that, it's too much. It's too much. But what exposure response prevention work does is it builds it as a hierarchy on your terms. And I think when we do that with our body, let's take you flying, Gina, right? You weren't okay, maybe you were, and you white knuckled it and you're a brave badass, which you are obviously. So you probably did do that. But most people who have flying anxiety, the recommendation isn't to just get on a plane. Again, right. It's a nice idea. That's what the internet's going to tell you. Yeah, I was just scared and I did it anyways. And now I'm free and traveling the globe and getting paid. No, it doesn't happen like that. Most people, they look at a picture of a plane every day for a month. And you're going to look at the picture of the plane. You're going to sit with the anxiety that comes up with your body. So you're going to sit with whether it's sweating or hyperventilating or getting dizzy, all of that. And you're going to then hold that discomfort in your body and learn literally over time, over that course of the month, that you are actually safe. Mm-hmm. And this all goes back and you slowly scale it from the picture to a movie of a plane. And then you go to an airport and sit outside. And then from the airport, you go inside and it's a very slow progression. But what this all comes back to is this idea that you are building these neural pathways, teaching yourself that you are safe. Because at the end of the day, all of these feelings that you're feeling are your body being miswired because we all evolved to have fear responses back when we lived in tribes. Yeah. And when we come to that understanding that it's a miswiring of our body and we have the power to learn and grow through that, it can be a really powerful transition in understanding kind of our step forward, that like it's not a bad reaction, it's a reaction in service of ourselves. And we have the ability to change that reaction in service of the self we want to become. And I think that's often forgotten, that like all of this discomfort is actually trying to save us, and we just have to harness it to save ourselves differently.
Ooh, I love that. Yeah, I always
I don't know if this is help. Am I making any
No, my
sense?
gosh.
Okay, I'm just like,
yes.
I'm like,
we're eating this up. It's okay. So resonant. And yeah, I think when it comes to this kind of titration that you're speaking to, right, taking this in sips, taking this in a way that is, doable for you, I think is so important for people to hear. And it reminds me of, this is also another silly example, but my daughter and I went to Disneyland, and she went into this roller coaster that's, she's 9. She's never gone on this like upside down roller coaster before. And I just feel like I watched anxiety and fear being overcome, like personified, as we're in this lineup. And we went on it a few times. And, the first time I just kept telling her, even up until we get into the seat, you can get out. Like if it feels like it's too much, we can just get out.
Totally.
And she's like, no, I can do this. I can do this. And the first time we went around, it was pretty much her white knuckling, closing her eyes the entire time.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, but I know it's going to be okay. The next time she went on, she opened her eyes for like the beginning part, yes, right? And then by the end of it, she had her eyes open the whole time and had her arms wide open. And I said, wow, like that was pretty much so much of my journey, just in this example of how we create safety for our bodies. And I love that you speak to how these emotions of fear and anxiety really are just misaligned. I always call them like bouncers that are working at the wrong door. Like they think they have to protect you, and these bodyguards, and we get to like recycle or repurpose them to actually work for us. Because I think it's such a wise part of our bodies that's saying, hey, there's something wrong here. Hey, can you check? It's just like, like physical pain. We want physical pain so that we know how to nurture and take care of a broken ankle. And so that's one of the first steps that I think Sam and I both took, was seeing it not as something that was wrong with us or against us, but actually what was so beautiful about us, that there's this wise system in our body, albeit it was obviously misaligned, but it is literally coming online for me because it's trying to protect me. And so when you see that, you don't feel as attacked by yourself, which is, I think, sometimes something we all experience, is like, why am I doing this to myself? Or why is this happening to me? Or why is my body against me?
Totally. And I think one of the things that I also try to like infuse into that, and I completely agree, that as we move through healing, we get to a place where we can see with perspective that it is in service of ourselves and our growth, is that it's also goddamn hard. So, and miserable. So like, I don't think any of us are saying like, oh, this is awesome feeling anxious.
Not at all.
Totally. Like, I know you're not saying that. I just want to like come on and be like, it is miserable. Like fully no. Like, did I brush my teeth today? Yes. Was that rare? Also, yes. Like, I'm still trying to get my shit together over here. Like, you think you arrive and like get a job at Harvard and you got it together? No, sorry. Never happens. It's always a flaming disaster. And that's okay. And I think it's about being able to hold space for how hard it is, and also it being in service of our growth and improvement. 100%. And we don't always have to improve. Sometimes we just need to be. And I think that's forgotten a lot. I've recently been kind of having this just increasing conflict. I used to run like full time 2 entire social channels. So Kate Speer is about serious mental illness, and then my 2 service dogs are on this channel, Waffle Nugget. And I was like, why am I doing this? Like, what is the point? Like, and again, I feel I have an existential crisis at least like 3 times before breakfast. So that's not a big deal. Welcome to my brain. I'm going to rebrand. I'm going to start over. Like, it's just absurd. But that aside, I was just realizing that I was so tired of this idea that you have to create these like viral content concepts, when actually walking outside is goddamn spectacular. And sitting in the grass, and just like last night I literally sat in the grass and picked clover, and I was like, this is heavenly. And I actually think sometimes social media distorts our ability to remember that the little things are why we're here, the people that we're surrounded by are why we're here, and that you don't always have to be hyper productive and hyper healing, growth oriented And often when we slow down and are present, that healing naturally occurs. And so I think it's always important to anchor any of the work we do in the truth that we don't have to do it. We don't need to do it to be worthy and enough. And in the little mindful moments we find, and the more we enjoy them and the more we hold that truth, the more we serve our path to well-being and recovery, if that's what we're looking for.
Oh my God, Kate, you're such an eloquent speaker. You must have Gemini somewhere in your birth chart. I'll have to look later.
Yeah, you're gonna have to look at, I was telling actually a girlfriend, I was like, I like don't even know how to do my chart. I know I'm supposed to know my chart.
I need all of your info
for this.
I'm so curious.
Well, I mean, I am definitely a Leo. I am a Leo.
Okay,
August
that makes
14th.
senknow.
Yeah, totally. Like loud diva. It's coming out. Coming out. You're like, can I get a word in? No, this is my show. I don't know if you guys know. I know. I mean, I'm not actually that, but I like,
love it.
It comes out. I just like, yeah, it's like that. And then, I was born at midnight. So I was born, everyone thought I was going to be born on August 15th. And I came out at 11:59. And my mom always says, you were born to prove the world wrong. And you started on day one. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. So
in very Leo fashion.
But, Leo fashion. Yeah.
Speaking of, social media, it's not really a place that glamorizes process, right? Like social media is
it's a disaster. Yeah.
It's a disaster. It's all outcomes. And there was
I hate it. Like I actually hate it. Like it's my job like to actually like help improve the ecosystem and I'm so grateful for the people it's brought to my life, but literally social media should die. I think it's like the single worst thing that's been ever created for people's well-being.
Truth.
Honestly, we share so many of the same sentiments. It's like Gina and I feel like it's like a necessary evil. We're like, okay, like it's evil, but like how do we use it for good?
Exactly.
Right? Like it's and we know it's not inherently evil,
totally.
Right? It's about like whose hands it gets into, but we're like, okay, let us be the ones who actually use this to spread information that we believe and have that we believe is going to be helpful and that we've weaved with intention. But there was something you said earlier that I loved so much. I feel like it should honestly be like a quote. Maybe it already is, but you said success is in the work or success is in the steps. And I find it interesting that if we don't believe that, then of course, naturally what we're believing is success is in the outcome. So then what we do is we don't take these incremental steps and then we pendulum swing. And what I learned in my therapy journey was that it was the pendulum swing and then wanting to not do things incrementally, not being patient with myself, wanting to do more than I had the capacity to. Like, for example, getting on the airplane before I look at the picture of the airplane. That's what's actually pendulum swinging me back into the shutdown. And then I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do things? Like, why is this so terrible? It's like, because you're not lovingly teaching yourself safety. Like, you're actually just getting mad at yourself for not feeling safe, which is actually going to create more unsafety.
It's exactly that. And it's one of those things where if I like to think about it, like whenever I think about however, the project or the process that I'm working towards, if there's like a goal, like for example, like writing a memoir, like that's insane, but let's do it.
Actually.
Like I was like, okay. And I broke it into I literally broke it into, I'd be like, I'm going to write a sentence. And then I would give I'm a 5-year-old. I'm like a 5-year-old loud Leo who works for Harvard, apparently. That's ridiculous, but fine, whatever. I give myself stickers. Like I should have brought it as but I have stickers everywhere. Like I have one for if I exercise, one for if I brush my teeth. Like there's sticker charts all over. My husband is like, what, are we in the kindergarten? And I'm like, yes, we are.
Yes.
Because everything I do counts. And when I can see it, because I'm a visual learner, I feel empowered. And I think when we think about life like a staircase, it's like if you're going to take a leap up and you're going to do 7 steps, the likelihood that you're going to slip and fall is very high. But if they're small, you actually make the progress. And so I often think about a huge part of how I navigate my life and have navigated my recovery and navigate literally everything is by breaking into tiny little steps so that I can feel both the self-efficacy from having done something like, hey, I drafted the email. I'm not even kidding. I put that on my to-do list, and then I cross it off, and then I put the email in the email, and then I put and I cross it off. And people think I'm nuts, but at the same time, every single time I give myself positive feedback for doing the little thing, I'm creating neural pathways and increasing the likelihood and the ease with which I'll do it the next time I do it. And so all of that serves both within my own mind and within my own body. And then it also allows me to acknowledge in my physical being, with all the cute little star stickers galore, that it counts and it does matter. And it's often overlooked that these little things do count. They really do count. And as we get older, we forget that all of the foundations of our existence is built on these little tiny steps. And I guess I just wish that was celebrated more. And I know I'm not saying everyone needs participation trophies. I get it. We've gone too far in that regard. But I think when it comes to mental illness and healing, we've forgotten that. And I think it's important to bring that back into the fold.
Yeah, I think what you're really speaking to, and something that I talk often with my clients about, is getting to know yourself and building this relationship to self. And, when I think about my relationship with Sam, we've been best friends for 5 years now. And over this 5 years, I have gotten to know Sam so well, to the point that I know how she wants to be celebrated. When she's having a hard day, I know how to respond. And sometimes I don't, and I'm open to learning. It's okay, that's not what you need. Okay, how can I better support you now? And it's built up this trust between us where there is safety because of how many times I've showed up for her. And we get to do that for ourselves. And so if stickers, is going to help you, then do that.
Exactly.
Yes. Get to know yourself. I call it partnering with your brain, partnering with your nervous system.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And part of partnering with these parts of us is you have to get to know it and taking that time to see, does this work? Does this not? Because I actually use stickers too. And I need to have things in my space that feel comforting to me. So I have stuffed animals that I've gotten from clients and pictures of my daughter. And, that used to be something I'd be embarrassed about. I'm 40, I should not have stuffed animals. But now I'm fuck it. I want to have them. And they make me feel safe when I travel, and they make me feel at home. And like I said, even the stickers, it's something that I think, especially from my childhood trauma, things like this weren't noticed. And so for me, it's this commitment to myself that's I'm going to notice what you do. And a mantra that I say to myself is, I saw that. I saw what you did there. And then whether it be a sticker or whatever, I really take that extra step, because that's truly what I wish I had growing up. And now I have the privilege as an adult to do that for myself. So I love that you touched on that.
Oh, I love that. And I think the thing too is that for those of us who do live with mental illness, our mind is constantly distorting reality. Mental illness distorts the lens through which we see the world. And so readily, the first thing that it does, and it's natural, it's a human thing, is to criticize itself. And it becomes a very inner bullying kind of self-loathing loop. And I find that having that outward proof, it's hey, actually, I did show up for me. Look, you could see it.
It's
I've done it for 3 years. It's evidence, exactly. And it's outside the body. And I think oftentimes when our bodies, especially in times of dysregulation, it's so hard to know where to find kind of a grounding force, building in patterns of both self-efficacy, but also proof of that self-efficacy can be deeply, deeply healing. I mean, one of my recent obsessions, I know, Sam, you and I were touching on it a little bit earlier before the call, was just cold plunging. And I always thought it was something hot girls did to show off their cute butt. I'm congratulations. That's not a bikini. You're flossing your ass. What? I don't understand. I just don't understand. I don't get it. I will go commando every day, all the time. But I'm that's not a bikini. Fine, whatever. It doesn't matter. But that's what I thought about. I was this is for gym bros and that. But then, of course, I was doing some research and I was learning about, the parasympathetic nervous system and basically how to activate it without knowing how to activate it. Because I think for me, this idea of safety in a body was so foreign to me. Yeah. I think I lived in such continuous dissociation, disconnect between my mind and my body, that people be oh, just work on your mind-body connection. And I was well, go fuck yourself because I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, how? And so I was trying to figure out how, and I really got into cold plunging. And now I have a calendar, literally, like that used to be on the wall, and now it's off the wall because we ran out of wall space. But it's like of every single day that I plunged. And it was proof both that I did it, but it was also proof that it worked. It was like, I've done this. I can see that I've done this. So in that time of dysregulation, in that time where I'm like, I don't know where to go or what to do, I could see on the wall, oh, look, for 92 days, I've gotten in cold water like one of those bikini divas, and like, it's working. So let's do it again. You know what I mean? And I think like, we like often pretend that like we're all put, like we have the answer. Like, you don't need, it doesn't have to be cute. Like, whatever's working. You want a stuffed animal? Like, absolutely have a stuffed animal. Like, the world is on fire. There's too much going on. Like, anything that helps, use it. And I think that's something too that like, yeah, there shouldn't, like, screw the shame is, I guess, all I'm saying, because whatever helps. And, you know, if it takes stickers, stuffies, and some cold water, like, damn straight, it's working.
Yes.
Yeah, like I'll take it. You know, for me too, Kate, healing the mind-body connection or like dissociative tendencies was the hardest journey I've ever gone on. And what's so interesting is, you know, when you're disconnected and then you find out you're disconnected, you try to use your mind to get back to being reconnected. You're like I remember thinking the thought, like, I'm dissociated. So I was like, okay, so how do I become undissociated? But I'm like using my mind yet still. And so
it's a whole,
yeah. And so I love how you said it really is about going through the body and also having evidence outside the body. Like, we have to inform and engage with our body. And so I think, yeah, cold plunging for sure. You don't have to have like a bikini diva kind of body to do it. You just need some cold water and go in a river, like get a tub.
Oh, totally. I was not implying that it should be that. I just always, that was the assumption.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many barriers, right, to the things that help us too, like our own preconceived notions about it or judgments or resistance. But I love how you said just find what works and do it and create evidence for yourself that it does work. Because one of the things I try to raise with all of my clients, and you've mentioned it already, is the self-efficacy. Because when we don't believe in our ability to do things, like that's very disempowering. And so I love how you've divided everything into tiny steps. It's like draft the email, put in the email, edit the email, send the email. Because like you said, your brain is learning, like, I do this. I know how to do this. I do this well. I do this consistently. And when we believe and build like brick by brick, like Gina said, that story about ourselves, about our ability to be efficacious, we can create more momentum.
Exactly. Yes. That 100%.
Yeah. There was also a question I wanted to ask you, and I'm really curious how you'll answer this. But when you were sharing a lot of your story of how you were on different medications and you had been inpatient and you dealt with depression and anxiety and misdiagnoses, one of the things that I thought was really notable about your shares is that it seemed that you were never truly identified with anything that you dealt with. It was always like, I'm Kate, and I tend to deal with these things. And I think that's a really huge difference between people who can move through these patterns, whether they be negative or painful, and people who have a lot harder time moving through them. And so I'm wondering if you can share anything about that for people who feel like their diagnosis or their negative patterns really define them, and how to begin to see themselves differently.
Yes.
Because you're someone I really feel knows who you are outside of those things. And it helps you engage and relate to them in a way that allows you to support yourself more fully.
Oh, that's such a powerful, first of all, thank you for those kind words. And then it's such a powerful question. I think one of the things we're living through right now is a pathology. We basically over-pathologize human emotion, a pathology epidemic, so to speak. And I think social media has normalized certain things, and it has been powerful in some ways, and yet we've gone too far. Sadness is not a diagnosis, and it isn't depression. Being nervous is not anxiety. It's not an anxiety disorder. And that is not to say that every feeling is not valid. It is merely to say that diagnosis exists for the sake of treatment. Diagnosis is not an identity, and it doesn't define us. And I think, although now I live with complete understanding that my diagnoses are merely ways for the insurance company to pay or not pay, help me pay my bills, I think I really did struggle with the blending of identity and diagnosis for a long time. I think in college, I was bipolar Kate. And I was not Kate with bipolar disorder. I was bipolar before I was Kate. And it was a really dangerous reality. It perpetuated my misdiagnosis. It perpetuated the mistreatment. It perpetuated everything that went wrong because I told my story through the lens of an illness. And when you tell the story through the lens of an illness, you become that illness. What we focus on, we embody. And that's not to say that when you're in the depths of despair and pain, it's not natural to be focused on that heartbreaking hell. I get it. It is, I get it and I don't get it. I get that I don't get it. I get that my own reality was all consuming. And as soon as I realized that by living within my diagnosis, I was caging myself, I started to chip away and like pick that lock over and over again. And I think there is, actually, I know there is a proclivity to lean towards certainty. We want an answer, right?
Yeah.
If we have a word for it, then we have the chance at belonging, a chance at putting it in a box. And that's unfortunately not the human condition. The human condition is a messy, fluid, ever-changing, effervescent reality. And I think the first thing we can do, and this really goes back to why I really believe that everyone should be doing exposure therapy. It's why I love that you did what you did with your kid, Gina. I think that's like the neuroplasticity of a young person's mind is so cool. Like you can actually face your fears. Like what would take me 6 months of exposure therapy could take a kid a week. Like monumental changes can occur. But what I'm trying to say is that it's all about slowly learning to sit with that discomfort of saying, yeah, I am more than this box and I don't fit in this one sheltered thing. And slowly testing the waters to move beyond the bounds of that structure. And when we do that, what we find is things we love, people we connect with, and also that the illness was never who we were to begin with, that we were always the actions in face of it. We were always the resilience that fought it. And I think that is lost a lot today. I think we've made a lot of strides in mental health advocacy, and I think some of them have been really dangerous and done really inappropriately. And we have just pathologized being human. And that's actually not mental illness. That's a discredit. That's a disservice to mental illness. And so I think for people who feel like they have to cling to their diagnosis, I'm not here to judge. I used to do it. And I would ask, why? What's keeping you there? What do you need from it? And where else might you be able to find it? Because that's where the healing lies. And that's where the freedom lies. And that's where the light comes back in.
Could not have thought of a
that's
better answer to that question.
Oh, good.
You're just
like rearranging my spandex.
I cannot wait to read this dang memoir.
Oh boy, buckle up. It's dark. No, I thank you. No, it's actually, so it's a story of me and my best friend, and our adventures of having serious mental illness. And it's really all about how life is about finding our people. And I think so often we forget that true healing is being in our body with others I was reading this great study on nervous system regulation. And as someone who has spent, the last 2 years, like really focused on learning how to even get into my body. Like I had to cold plunge for 3 months until like I actually started having that connection realign. The study was just blew me away. And it's just literally that when we are with our people and we feel safe with our people, we not only come home to ourselves, but our minds and our bodies heal themselves innately. And I was like, that's it. That's what this world is about. And I think my book, Maura and Me, is about that, is about when we find our people and when we feel safe with them, we have the chance to come home. And I think going back to what I just was speaking about, diagnosis can give us a way to find our people. And then we let go of the diagnosis because that's not what it's about. It's about being there together. And together is where it's at.
God.
Well, thank you so much for being one of my people. I'm so grateful to get to call you my people. And
I feel the same way.
I honestly, Gina, I think this was like my favorite conversation, like honestly all season. Like this was just
seriously.
Yeah, Kate, I honestly have no words. Like you really took them out of my mouth because I spoke like not that much during this episode.
Well, that's because I'm a Leo. I don't know if you know that, but I'm a Leo. So,
but she's a double Aries, so she's
like
got
I can talk,
a lot of fire
but
too.
I was like,
not as much as me.
I was like, I am sat and I am absorbing, and I think that for all the people who feel either identified with their diagnosis or they feel completely on one side of this pendulum swing, they're going to learn so deeply how to create safety and to find efficacy in the small steps, which is everything. It's not nothing. It's actually everything. And
totally,
as we close out this episode, you already know because you're a regular spiraling higher listener, but we always ask our guests, what theme or themes have you had to consistently spiral through, revisit in your life? And I'm curious to know what you'll share with us has been a theme for you throughout yours.
Honestly, it's interesting to say this, but it has been about, I would say there's two that I would come kind of, and that is intention. And so the idea of living in alignment with intention. And for me, alignment is service of my community. And I think I keep coming back to that. Like, I think as much as I loved my time at the Doggist, like I spent 5 years running this incredible company, I was out of alignment and I was in a constant state of fight or flight. And I was in I got so much done actually because it was just all trauma reaction. And I think I have to keep learning that every time I step out of alignment. It comes back to this truth that I am here to tell stories and help people know that they are enough as they are, and that one day at a time we build a better tomorrow. And I think the second thing I'm learning more than anything is to be able to stand in my truth and be assertive. I am a hardcore recovering people pleaser. And I think I'm continually coming back to this truth that when I stand in my truth, I help others do the same. And as scary and terrifying as it is to do that, it serves everyone. And that seems like a lesson I learn every day. But yeah, those are the two.
Those are so beautiful. I'm, as a mom, I'm so happy that my daughter is going to grow up in a world where these conversations are more normal, because I know that for us, it just wasn't. And I keep on getting emotional every time you talk, and I know Sam is too. And I think it's because when someone is so honest and so vulnerable, it strikes a chord with us because it's true. It's truth, and we can see ourselves in that. And so just thank you so much for bringing so much light to the truth, to your story. And I think everyone listening to this conversation is going to be inspired to share their story too, because all of our stories matter, and they matter because we're here. And that's a good enough reason to share it. And thank you for creating a world that all of us get to experience in a new paradigm, and for shifting the way that we normalize these conversations. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's a gift. Thank you so much for having me.
You're literally the best, Kate. You sharing your stories have connected us and so many other people. And so just before we sign off, are you still writing your Substack newsletter, or like where can people find you and read more about your story, totally. What's going on?
Absolutely. So I am still writing my Substack. You can just find it. I'll give them the link. I'm actually in the process of basically converting it into what I'm calling healing out loud. So it's all about community storytelling. I'm tired of writing about me, which is shocking for a Leo. I know, like what? But it's happening. I'm over it. And I want to share other people's stories. Yeah, I know. Everyone's shocked. My mom's like, this is going to last a week, but that's fine. A week is quit. No. So you can find me on my Substack. I write my Substack. And then also, I'm still on social media, even if I have no idea what I'm doing and I'm just like picking clover with my dogs. So what else?
Love it.
And that's Kate Speer and Waffle Nugget. But it would be an honor if anyone is feeling inclined to share their stories. I have a page called Solidarity Stories where everyone submits them anonymously. And it's one of the most spectacularly beautiful experiences of my life to be able to hold that. I get about 100 stories a day, and I try to share them. And it's just because I believe that when we share our truths, we set ourselves free. And the greatest gift we can give really is being ourselves and letting others in, because that heals us and them. So be honored to have anyone join me over there as well.
Oh my God.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
No, don't be.
I'm just like such a, I'm like, I don't even know. I don't even make sense. So I'm just kind of like rattling. And then you guys
make so much sense.
Okay. I love you. I didn't mean to make you cry.
No,
we love crying. It's totally fine. It's cancer season, you know?
Like, I mean, I love crying too. Like crying is where it's at. Like good cries, nothing better. It's like, it's better than an orgasm. I know I'm not supposed to say that, but I really believe that.
I agree.
It's an orgasm of the heart. It's an orgasm of the heart.
Exactly. Yeah. There you go. Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, we're going to go cry off camera now. But anyone who's still here with us, make sure to tune in to Kate's channel. We'll have all of her links. And yeah, like she said, if you feel called to share your story along with 100 others any day of the week, feel free to do so. And Kate will link your TED Talk as well, because you're such a wonderful speaker. Thank you.
So good.
Thank you.
Bye.